How's that thing work? Test, test. You ready to go? Couple more seconds, good? All right. Hey everybody, thanks for coming out to my talk today, and thanks for everybody that is making NEOISF possible. This is actually my first time in this location. Didn't realize how close it was. It's like literally 5 minutes away from my house, which is perfect, so I'll definitely plan on attending a lot more. The Independence one was always tricky because I had to drive the exact opposite way in traffic and then get off at the exit, which took forever. So it's great to be here. But if you don't know, I'm Dave Kennedy. I started Trusted Sec and Binary Defense. There are two local companies here in Cleveland. One is in Strongsville. We actually just moved our offices down the road a little bit, and it's actually been kind of fun because we just put a brand new security system in, and of course everybody's been trying to break it, so I get alarm notifications like every 2 hours. But we moved down the road a little bit in Pearl Road in Strongsville, so we have a whole new building and everything. It's been really cool. And then we have a building in Hudson, Ohio too. So if you're ever in Hudson, you can always stop by, and we always have food and pizza and stuff like that there. So you're always welcome to stop by. It's a 24/7 shop. So, but I'll get into what I want to talk about. Today's talk is a little bit about a lot of the tools that I've been working on, or things that I've noticed as far as other tools that I get to see that do a very good job. And I've literally been living in coding land in the past couple of weeks, so human interaction is going to be a little interesting for me in the next couple of minutes here. But I've released a lot of tools here recently. I've also released a bunch of new updates to a lot of the existing tools. If you haven't noticed, the Social Engineer Toolkit and Unicorn are now Windows 10 compliant, so they've all the attack vectors in there have been rewritten or added and enhanced to get around Windows 10, which wasn't much. It was like a couple minor tweaks. So all of it, I was like, well, nothing was. Actually, to be honest with you, like instead the Java applet attack, I had to change like a dash, and that was it to get around that. So, but anyways, it's $1 billion worth of investment. It's great. But I also did a lot of other things. I open sourced our attack platform, which I'll talk a little bit about what that is and how you can use that, and a few other ones. But I did want to play a clip because I thought it was just kind of interesting that I was on yesterday. I did a interview on CBS. And it's the first time I've been on CBS before, so I never had been on that one. But this one was interesting because of everything that's been happening in the news around Paris. And now, of course, encryption is coming under fire because the government can't get into a lot of the communications that you're seeing with terrorists. And it's an interesting debate that we have right now because, you know, post-Snowden, everybody was like, well, the government's spying on everything that we're doing, so we have to bolster all of our encryption, and here's all the ways that the government is looking at all of our stuff. And so you had all these applications and everything come out that are very centric around privacy and encryption and security. And there was a blog post or a tweet that just came out today that actually showed ISIS has a poster, and it shows what apps are good for them to use that circumvent, you know, government eavesdropping, and which ones are bad for them not to use. So they can give them to all of their terrorists, so they don't have to actually use those specific apps that may be intercepted or eavesdropped upon. So some of those, like good, was with Telegram, Wicker, a few of the other ones. But there's a lot of different ones that they specifically recommend. It's an interesting debate because, you know, for me, I'm very much a privacy advocate. I think, you know, there shouldn't be, you know, different ways of getting into encryption, and encryption needs to be strong. But at the same time, you know, there are ramifications for what that means, which means that if the government can't get into those and they can't intercept communications, they have to rely off of like HUMINT and a lot of other types of methods of getting after people to actually go and encrypt it. So this is what this interview was about. Now there was a really weird question like halfway through. She asked me about EMPs. I don't know where that came from. Like literally I'm talking about like how the government, you know, eavesdropping. She's like, well, what about EMPs? Could we use EMPs? I'm like, okay, well, and it's interesting. Doing news is one of the weirdest things ever because you literally have to be prepared for any question. And I remember I was on, and I try to stay away from some of these, but I was on one news anchor, and is really well known for being a super Republican or whatever. And when I go on the news, I don't ever give my opinion of political stances or, you know, anything like that. I just kind of talk about what I do. And the funny one about this one was when I was on there, it had to be about like government protection around their systems, because I think it was the OPM breach. Okay, the OPM breach happened, and what the government's doing to protect the issues. And so I'm on this thing, I'm talking about how the government needs to, do better at security and everything else. And the guy's like, yeah, completely. And I blame Obama for all this. Don't you agree? I'm like, I don't know how this is. I'm not exactly sure this is Obama's fault. I'll just talk about this stuff here, and I don't necessarily agree with that opinion or whatever. And then one other time, and this is the worst one I've ever had to experience ever in my life. I won't say which news agency it was. But I'm sitting there, and it's around the same time for the OPM breach, and I'm supposed to be on there talking about my experiences in the government side and how I would protect the infrastructure. And they're like, all right, and you sit there and you're sitting in front of a camera and you can't see anything. And I'm used to this. I'm fine. I'm not sweating. I'm perfectly relaxed. And they're like, hey, 3 minutes till you go live. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm getting ready. I'm getting off my phone, and I'm sitting there. I'm waiting for them to go to me. And they start going into this Iran nuclear capabilities. They're like, I'd like to introduce David Kennedy. He's an Iranian nuclear expert, focusing on and there's only one copy that I know of, and I'm the only person that has this copy that exists. I go from smiling to I don't know how to explain it. And the body's an amazing thing. Your mind can tell your body to do anything it wants to. I was sweating out of places I've never sweat before, and it was instant. It was I was fine and I was sweating. And I didn't know what to do, so I'm like, yeah, so this Iran stuff, I know nothing about Iran nuclear policy or politics or anything. I'm like, yeah, it's bad, but the cyber stuff that's going on in the Middle East, what about the cyber stuff, right? And they're like, well, that's interesting, let's go back to the Iranian nuclear stuff. And they started throwing out a bunch of acronyms of councils and stuff. I'm like, oh, it was so bad. So needless to say, this wasn't one of those, but it was a good one. So y'all can hear it.
End-to-end encryption was used by the terrorists involved in the Paris attacks. Homeland Security Committee Chairman Michael McCall said Tuesday, the dark space of the internet is becoming a breeding ground for terrorist communications, recruitment, and plotting. David Kennedy is a former Marine specialized.
Whenever I'm on TV, I'm always either wearing pants or a t-shirt or shorts. And I actually don't ever wear suits, ever. I only own 2, and this is the only, if you ever see me in the news, I either have this red tie on or a yellow tie. That's all I have, so.
In intelligence, the founder of Trusted Second Information Security Consulting Company joins us from Cleveland, Ohio. David, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
When we're talking about this network, ISIS, what kind of tools are already at the disposal of the nation's leading governments to try and disrupt the terror network?
Well, they look for certain patterns in communications, and what you've seen kind of post-Snowden is all of the terrorists and terror cells have focused on encryption and trying to hide what they're doing. So it's become very challenging for the government to actually look at what the terrorists are doing. So they rely on other forms. There's what we call humans or human intelligence or signals intelligence. A lot of those are very difficult to keep up with and to look for those types of patterns of behavior, which is probably what we saw happen in Paris.
Okay, then how do you tackle the problem of end-to-end encryption where only the sender and the person getting the message can read that message? Even the companies that are delivering the software required here don't have the code for it. If that's how these guys pulled off a Paris attack, how do you disrupt that?
You've heard the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all these governments say that, when you go to a stronger type of encryption and it's difficult for us to break it, it's going to be difficult for us to find the bad guys. And I think what happened when you saw the Snowden events transpire, and this is in no way, shape, or form, pointing blame, this is a discussion that was happening beforehand. The discussion was on privacy, and we have to have our privacy. And so you saw stances like Apple, for example, employing military-grade encryption. Places like Wicker coming out that employs, military-grade encryption. And it all became about privacy and protecting the information and the communications. And it essentially locked out the government from being able to do what they typically could have done, which is survey these types of patterns or communications. And so we have to have the debate, not just here in the United States, but globally, around whether or not we allow the government to be able to have hooks into this type of information to be able to monitor and survey these types of attacks, or do we want full privacy from the government being able to look at it? You can't have both. And that's something that we need to have those discussions around right now, because we're not going to be able to find those.
Can I ask you another question about a way to disrupt the electronic, the digital presence of ISIS? I know that there's an electromagnetic pulse weapon. It's developing this thing that's called CHAMP to counter electronics. Why can't you just go in with an electromagnetic pulse and knock out all of the electronics that ISIS is? By the way, devices, but surely the trucks that they're using,
It's funny, you're getting these questions, you're like, all right, how am I going to answer this?
that they're using, the kind of radar and technology they're using are still powered by the things that an EMP could disrupt.
I think in
This is BS, Dave, in full effect.
warfare, an electromagnetic pulse or an EMP makes sense. It disrupts any type of electronic type of communication. So computers, and there's a lot of computers built into vehicles and tanks and radar systems. For conventional warfare, that makes sense. The problem with ISIS is that their main capabilities right now is they want sleeper cells, in every single major nation. They want an organization that is centrally, or not centrally spread, but spread across the entire world. And so, an EMP isn't necessarily going to knock them back to where they have it. Now, in places like Syria, where it's conventional warfare, where we're going after specific groups.
I don't know about the rest of that. I just kept talking about EMPs. So, but it's always interesting when you get on those. And it's also funny, like my friends on Facebook will always have a challenge word for me that I have to say. Like I've said meow, and I say meow 6 times one time in one interview. And then on my other friends, I have a bunch of Xbox buddies that I play Destiny with, and they always think it's the coolest thing. I think if I can get their name on TV. So this last one, it was the CIA director's AOL was hacked. And so I was talking on CNN. This is CNN International, and I'm like, yeah. So my friend Pat Bishop, he's one of my buddies on Xbox. He's like, yeah, he still uses AOL, and he gave me permission. I hacked his account, and I was making fun of Pat basically on CNN. So it's not he was the brunt of the jokes for the next few times, but those are always fun to see those on there. But I mean, on this topic specifically, it is a discussion I think that we need to have, kind of not just the United States. It's the implications are global on this type of stuff. So. There we go. So anyways, off of this topic and onto the fun stuff while you're all probably here. So I'm going to go through a bunch of things very quickly, and it's probably going to hurt a little bit as far as brain goes, but that's what it's for. The first thing was the Trusted Sec Attack platform, which we initially called it TARDIS because I'm a big Doctor Who fan, but then I figured if I made that public, there's like copyright issues with that or something, so I renamed, but there's probably still remnants of TARDIS in the code somewhere. But what this is that, as pen testers, and this isn't just for pen testing, but we do a lot of consulting work, and so we have to ship boxes out to customers, and it cuts down on travel expenses and everything else, but you can also use this maliciously. And what it is, it's a little device, and we use Intel NUCs, and you can usually build a really solid Intel NUC for like $500 or so, and it has, I think it's like 8 to 16 gigs of RAM. You can do a 512 or a terabyte solid state drive. Decent processor, wireless cards are all built in, works great. And it also has a bunch of USBs in the back. And what we do is we build these little things, we source them out and just build, get them off of Amazon or whatnot. And then we build them. And what's cool is you can also get like a Verizon LTE card, so you don't have to worry about egress filtering or anything like that. And what you can do is you can literally pop one of these devices on a customer's network, and what it does is it establishes a reverse SSH connection back to headquarters, where you can basically be sitting on that network, as if you were really there. And what's cool about it is we also wrote and open sourced a full SSH VPN tunnel. So it allows you to do a full tap VPN as if you were sitting in that environment plugged into the network as well. So you can do that, and the way it works is it sends a reverse SSH out of the company either through the LTE card, or you can do it on the network itself if you allow the ports out, and it communicates to a box that's sitting on the internet with those SSH ports open. And then once you have that connection, you can just directly VPN into that box that's sitting on the internet through that reverse SSH channel back to the customer, and then do all of your testing and everything else. And I'll talk a little bit about what's on those boxes and how you can use them. But we've been using this for quite a long time. I've actually been building it for about 2 years and finally decided to open source it. It's very stable. And what's nice about it is the worst case scenario is if you send a box out to a customer and then it dies or it breaks or something. So it literally tries to repair itself, heal itself, find other ways out of the network. It tries to automatically detect if there's a problem and repair the operating system. So it has a lot of ways of keeping it stable over the network so that you don't have any major issues as it goes along. And it's all open source, but I just wanted to show it to you really quick. That's on my password, right? So literally all you have to do when you set this up is you just run the setup file. So all you have to do is, when it first starts up, it's going to ask you if you want to start the installation of TAP. And this works on any Debian or Ubuntu-based repository, so Kali, for example. I prefer putting this just on Ubuntu LTS. What'll happen, and this isn't a thing on Kali, Kali comes up with new releases all the time that aren't necessarily supported, right? So you have version 1 and version 2. So when they come out with version 3, if you have those boxes deployed long term, you basically don't have anything to update your systems or your tools or anything like that. So we don't necessarily recommend using Kali as a kind of a distribution. So most of the time we'll use Ubuntu LTS like 14.04, 03, and keep that up to date that way. But what's nice about this is once it's actually on the network too, it uses proxy chains to tunnel all of your traffic over the reverse SSH tunnel. So if they have any type of egress filtering or anything like that, it's going to route all of that HTTP, HTTPS traffic or anything else you're doing through those proxy chains. So you can use your own internet for that. It does it all automatically for you. So whenever you type a command, you do apt-get update, apt-get upgrade, you can keep everything up to date real time. So you just hit yes to do the install, and it's going to automatically go out and go and install all the latest packages because it needs a few Python modules. It needs to make sure that it's up to date before it pulls everything. It needs to get in a couple other things, but nothing major there. So let this go. And then it's going to ask if you want to keep TAP updated. This means that it'll automatically go out to the GitHub repository and pull all the latest updates. I don't recommend this because I'd rather keep, if I have a stable build, it's working fine, everything else, I'll go and do that, and then I'll test it out just to make sure that I don't introduce anything crazy. At a given time, we have anywhere between 100 to 150 taps running at a given point in time. So those are the types of assessments that we have kind of going on. So in those periods, we want to make sure that those are all stable. So we manually update those specific. And there's actually a script that manually update them that does them really quick. But I'll just go ahead and hit no here. And it's going to ask us whether or not you want to deploy SSH keys. And what will happen is if you use SSH keys, it'll automatically remote SSH into the box that's on the internet and place the SSH keys up there for you automatically so that it can automatically authenticate and all that good stuff. Or you can specify a password if you just want to use a password. If you're using a password, it creates a dynamic cipher key through AES and then encrypts that password. But the problem is that with anything that's going to be AES and that type of encryption, it's if you get access to that box, you can still grab that key if you know how to use it and decrypt it. And it's very easy to decrypt it once it's on the box. But if someone grabs that config file, it's just going to be an AES encrypted blob. And there's no real way around that unless you do something different. I haven't thought of any way of getting around that. But once you own the box, you have the box. So I always use SSH keys. Don't use a privileged account. It doesn't require a privileged account. So just when it connects, have it use a regular, small account that we usually just have it only access. You can't use bash or anything like that. All you need is SSH because it just creates the local host on the machine itself for that. So just a very limited user account on those boxes. So that in the event that this machine, somehow, if a customer grabs it or it gets intercepted, they can SSH back into those systems. It shouldn't have access to anything that would cause an exposure to any of the other ones that are out there. So you can do SSH keys. And so it will automatically generate SSH keys for you, all the key pairs, all that good stuff. And it's going to ask you for the remote IP address of the SSH server that you want to connect to. If I just say, test.test.com, I'm not going to actually connect anything. And it's going to ask you for the port that you want to connect on SSH. I always recommend doing like a non-standard port. What it'll also do too, if you want, there's a config option where it'll try to bounce out multiple ports until it can find a connection out. So not just 22, 23, it'll try all of the major ports until it finds a route out. If you do that, you have to set up something like IP tables on your box and NAT all of the ports to your one port that you have on the box itself. But we'll just do 22 as an example. And then it's going to ask for the local port that's going to be on the SSH box. When it does a reverse SSH tunnel, it needs to bind to a local port on that box. So this one, it starts off at like 10,003. So each one that you add will be like 10,003, 10,004, 10,005. So if you have 50 boxes, you can just kind of iterate through all of those and do that. And then it asks for the proxy chains SOCKS HTTP proxy port. And that's going to be just on that local host itself. You can do whatever you want on that one. But that's going to tunnel all that traffic through the local host out to the reverse SSH tunnel to HTTP and HTTPS traffic.
You're going to do the remote, the reverse SSH, and you're going to start at 10,000. But you said something about 50 boxes.
So what happens is let's just say that this is the box here and it's sitting on the customer site. It'll reverse SSH out to the customer site to your box that's sitting on the internet. But if you have 50 of them deployed, in different environments at different places, you want to do a different port for each one of those because it's going to bind to the local host interface on this box that's sitting on the internet. And so you don't want to have port conflicts locally on that machine. Yeah, it makes sense. So this will be the SOX proxy. It'll automatically go and pull updates. You can turn that off, but it'll automatically go and pull like security updates to the box itself, so you're not introducing any exposures. And one thing you'll see here in a little bit with the pen testers framework is it'll automatically keep all of your tools and everything else up to date, which is really nice. Now, one big thing that I added here is, so in the event that, let's just say SSH doesn't get out and there's something wrong, what this will do is you can have a text file sitting on an externally facing HTTPS server, and all you have to do is give it a parameter of, I wrote the code and I can't remember what it is, but it's something, it's in the README. I think it's like hang on off that real quick. Let's see. Okay, execute command. So if you see, if you have a text document on your web server that says execute command, every new line you can execute whatever command you want to on that box. So what'll happen is it'll query out every like 3 to 4 minutes, depending on what your interval is set at, and it'll grab that text file, and then it grabs it, it hashes it, it executes the commands, and then it continues to check in and looks for new ones. So you can always keep a command and control via TLS or HTTPS as a main method of kind of keeping it up to date as kind of a backdoor just in case something goes wrong via SSH. That is like the last ditch effort. I've had that happen before, and you're like, oh man, so you got to repair everything and fix everything, especially when you push a bad code update. So you can just keep that as default or whatever. Then it's going to ask for the username of the remote account. The remote account is going to be the username that you want to authenticate to the box that's sitting on the internet. So, and this is only a one-time thing. It only does this once. It doesn't store it anywhere after that. What it'll do is once it generates the SSH keys, it remotes in the box and it pushes the SSH keys to the authorized keys on the remote box itself, so you can maintain those keys on that box. So I'll just put testing. And again, I do not recommend using root or anything like that. Use a very limited user account for this. And then whatever password you're going to put in. This is going to fail. But what will happen here is it would then update and send it out to there. Now once that completes, it'll automatically go and build Proxy Chains 4, which is the new Proxy Chains NG. Proxy Chains actually got abandoned about 1.5 years ago, and then it got picked up and it's now Proxy Chains NG, which is now Proxy Chains 4. It'll automatically go and pull that source out, compile it for you, add it, and then reroute all the proxy stuff on that local box so that it can, you can get around any type of filtering that they might have in the environment. That's expected. And then once that finishes, it'll ask you if you want to install the pen testers framework, which I'll talk about here in a second. And once that completes, it'll actually install all the tools for you, and then it'll automatically keep them up to date for you. So it's a nice little box that you can kind of keep self-contained if you want to go and do pen tests, which is kind of neat. Any questions on that? All right, next one. Yeah.
You have your TLS updated, so no heartbeat?
Well, since this is going to be communicating outward, you have control of the server itself. So I definitely recommend TLS1.2, and yeah, definitely no heartbleed.
Have you run on an ARM?
I have run on an ARM. Yep. In fact, our boxes before that, we used to use the Lenovo ARM series small ones you can buy, and I ran an ARM Kali version of ARM on that as well, and that works perfectly fine as well. The only Debian packages it actually requires is Python pexpect, and none of those are any issue when it comes to support or dependencies. So that works great. So PTF, interesting enough, I think I debuted this about 2 years ago at NEOISF, and literally I was like planning on releasing it and doing all this stuff, and then I forgot about it, and then I released it about 4 or 5 months ago. And PTF is a framework for all of your tools, and what I found was that Kali is our go-to pen testing box, right? But you have a release cycle where Kali is 4 or 5 months old, and they released it, when they get new releases, they will update those tools. And so things like the social engineer toolkit, Metasploit, key things that you would use on a regular pen test, all of those are 4 or 5 months out of date, unless you use something like the bleeding edge repositories. And the bleeding edge repositories a lot of times break things. So, what I was looking for is a way for me to quickly build my own boxes that I could use my own, environment that I keep control over, and that's kind of where the pen testers framework came from. It's very much modeled off of Metasploit, so very modular. I actually wrote a programming language behind PTF so that someone that doesn't know any coding whatsoever, you can create your own modules in literally like 3 to 5 minutes. In fact, when I first released PTF, I had, I think, 11 tools in it. There's 109 now. And that's 4 or 5 months ago. And it's because the contributions to the community has been insane. I've added probably 50. The rest of them are all contributions from the community of like, hey, I use this tool, I'll just write a quick module. It takes them 3 minutes. You put a quick pull request in, and all of a sudden you have all of your tools. So it's a really easy way to keep all of your stuff up to date. Now the cool part about PTF is it now supports Fedora. Hang on, it's in the README file. Again, I coded all this, I just don't remember. So it supports any type of Debian, so Ubuntu, Debian, Arch Linux, Fedora, Mint, and a few other ones. So it supports a lot of different, operating system versions of Linux that you can support. But the way that you launch it, and you can get all of these tools, by the way, if you go to just github.com. Here, I can show you real quick. Just go to github.com/trustedsec. All of those tools are up on there. So PTF, Social Engineer Toolkit, one of the ones you're going to see here in a few minutes, Unicorn and Spray WMI. All the tools are up on there, always up there. But once you check it out, to run it, you just do ./PTF, and this will launch you into the framework. And to show you what it looks like, it's very similar to Metasploit, right? If you're familiar with Metasploit, you get an MSF prompt, right? You're going to get a PTF prompt. And it's going to look a little bit the same type of commands and feel and all that good stuff. Internet's a little slow for me. I'm using a MiFi. There we go. What's nice about this is once you pull it, you never have to worry about updating it again. It'll automatically, as soon as you run it, it'll automatically go out and grab all the latest modules and import them in. So every time you're running it, you're running the latest and greatest version with all the tools. So you have nothing to worry about when it comes to those. But notice it automatically detects the platform that I'm running. The tools and module tool count, I have 109 in there. If you want to see all the tools, all you have to do is type show modules. And you can see all the tools there with descriptions. And so it'll have all of the specific tools that you ever could possibly want to install. And I can claim, this one took me a month and a half to build, but it'll actually download and install all the proper dependencies and install Metasploit perfectly. If anybody's ever tried to install Metasploit by themselves, it is a feat in itself. You have to be like a crazy awesome person at Ruby, and I am not a crazy awesome person at Ruby. So after a month and a half, I can finally say that you can install Metasploit perfectly fine on this, and it works great. So that's one of the big feats that was on there. But if you want to install a module, you can just do use. And how I got tab completion? Oh yeah. Exploitation Metasploit. You can do show options. And this will list all of the options that you have available. You can see the repository location, where it's going to install it at. And what I did is, when I built this, is I wanted to, if you all kind of grew up with like Backtrack and, like WAPix and IWAX and Auditor and all of those, you always had like a /pentest directory where it broke all of your tools out in a very easy way for you to see what you can kind of go into. So I very much emulated the directory structures like that. So it creates a /pentest directory for you, and it puts all the tools in there. But what it also does is it creates launchers for you automatically. So you can launch the tools anywhere you want to in your Linux distribution. So if you want to launch MSF console from any directory, to launch it from any directory. Same thing for any of the tools that you install. So it automatically grab and install the launchers for you, or you can just go into the pentest directory and it breaks everything down into like exploitation, AV bypass, post exploitation, and it has all the tools and categories kind of broken down into that. Now, you'd be like, well, this kind of sucks, right? I have to install each tool by itself. That would kind of suck to have to go through 109. What you can do, you can just do use modules, install, update all. And what this will do is it will automatically go through each 109 of the tools and build all the tools, all its dependencies, install everything that it needs to, test it to make sure it's functioning properly, and it goes through all those 109 tools and then installs them for you. And then after that, once you're done with that and you're finished, if you ever want to update your tools, you just run this again, and it automatically goes through all of your tools. It doesn't rebuild them all, it just checks them all off the latest code base and makes sure that they're working, and then it installs all the rest of them for you. So you always have the latest and greatest updated tools that's out there. So it's a really easy way of kind of doing all those. Now, you can also do I think that's what it is. I have to remember. But you can also do PTF -- update all, and this will automatically go, yep, see there it goes. So it'll automatically go and install everything for you. I won't go through all that because it'll take a while, but you can do it from the command line too, so you can script it. So you don't ever have to worry about doing it from the framework itself. You can just do PTF update all, and then it'll go through and update everything. Now to write a module, super simple, except the Metasploit one. All right, Metasploit I had to do some magic that I don't even know how I did it, and it works fine now. But let's just go to like CD modules. If you ever messed with Metasploit before, you have a modules directory and then it kind of categorizes everything. Same thing with this one. If I go to modules, exploitation, and I'll just edit like SE toolkit. So this is the format for each of the modules. So you have the author of the module, the description of the tool, what type of repository that it's installed at. So you can do git, SVN, or file. File will automatically go and pull from a website the latest blob and pull it down for you on tar and all that good stuff. It automatically does recognition of like tars and gzips and stuff like that. So it'll go and pull those down for you. And then the repository location of where you go and download it from. And then any type of support you want to give for Debian or Fedora and any other ones out there. Now what's really cool is what are called launcher after commands. And a lot of tools, when you run them, you have to do something afterwards in order to install them. So after commands could be something like, hey, cd space install location, comma, Python, setup.py install. And it'll go through and run all those after commands after it's done installing, so to make sure that it's always running the latest and greatest. And then launcher is whatever you want to create the toolkit to be when you want to launch it from anywhere you want to. So really easy framework to create. And like I said, that as long as you know the install location, it takes about 5 minutes to actually go and develop, which is kind of neat. Any questions on that?
Let's say you don't want like 109.
Yep.
Suppose you only want like, let's say 99. Is there a way to just
install those?
Yeah, without having to remember?
So this was just actually added yesterday. So there's a config file under PTF called config/ptf.config. You can put what modules you want to ignore or entire categories. And so you can be like, hey, I want to ignore all AD bypass or code audit or whatever you want to, or these specific modules. You can build that list inside of the ignore these modules, and then it'll never ever install them or try to run them ever again. So you don't have to worry about keeping those up to date. So you can completely block entire categories and only install like exploitation, or kind of keep it with the ones that you kind of want to home into. So you can keep that all in there.
On that same line of thinking, what is the estimated space needed to install all these modules?
So,
and the requirements?
It's a great question. Usually from what I can tell, when you do the installation, since we're adding modules all the time, it takes time. But like some of the big boys, like really Metasploit, Social Engineer Toolkit's pretty big. Some of the other ones, require a lot of dependencies. Like for example, if you haven't checked this out, by the way, there's a tool out there for AV bypass called Shelter. Phenomenal tool. It's a Windows-based tool though, but you can run it in Wine. So to install Wine and everything else, the dependencies for that take a while. If I had to guess, all in all, I'd probably say it's, probably around, probably 2 to 3 gigs worth of tool space. I would say is probably what it ends up installing. And that's kind of where it's at there. But if you haven't checked out Shelter, by the way, really slick. It's built into PTF. But Shelter actually dynamically rewrites PE files, and you can take legitimate PE files, and it actually like tucks it into different spaces in memory throughout the whole application, and it's all dynamic and random. So it's really difficult to find, and it's pretty crazy. They did a comparison though. It's Shelter versus Unicorn, which is one of the tools that I wrote. And Unicorn gets 0 out of 57 on virus total, and Shelter had like 3 of 57. So it's like a competition now between us. I'm still 0. But you can enroll the modules. You can also turn off auto update, so you can turn that to off. So if you don't want to automatically update, the operating system itself, log files are stored in source logs PTF, and then you can change the base install pass. If you don't want pen test, you want something else, you can change it, and then the base install pass will be changed after all of that. Any other questions? All right, cool. Moving on. So anybody had a chance to check out Spray WMI yet? Couple? Cool. So if you don't know, like a lot of the common techniques that attackers will use is once they compromise a system, they need to move laterally in an environment, right? They need to get access to other systems that have the type of access or data that they need, and they need to escalate permissions and all that good stuff, right? And so penetration tests are supposed to simulate what real attackers do on a regular basis, and that's, hey, compromise one machine through social engineering or whatever. And then from there, can you escalate yourself to an administrator? Can you get yourself to other systems? Can you get to server environments that have the data that you want access to? And traditionally, the way that you would typically see that is there's usually a few different ways. First is compromise the machine, grabbing the local admin hashes on the box, and if that local admin hash in the box is the same across all the other ones, then you can move to other systems, right? Second is if the account that you're using is running as an administrator, you can escalate permissions, you can do a lot of other things. Like let's just say it's administrator multiple boxes, move to other boxes, right? That lateral movement piece. There's also a few other key concepts as well. You have Kerberos tokens, you have wdigest method, which is, if you're familiar with Mimikatz, it's a way of extracting clear text passwords from memory. So whenever you log on a machine, Windows actually stores a clear text version of your password in memory, and you can actually extract that. So you can just dump the clear text password. So if it's a 50-character password, you just dump your 50-character password in clear text in memory. And then there's also other methods. But once they have access to those credentials, what they'll typically do is use methods like psexec, for example. Everybody heard of psexec? Pass the hash, everybody heard of that, right? So a lot of times they'll use things like RPC or SMB as main methods to authenticate to remote systems in order to compromise them, and that's where pass the hash and everything comes in. With psexec, there's very known patterns of how to detect that, right? There's specific event logs that are generated, and there's specific things that have to occur in order for psexec to happen, including creation of services and other things that have to happen in order for psexec to properly function. So that's a very noisy protocol. If you've ever used Metasploit with psexec, what happens is it actually creates a service on the box itself, an executable binary on the machine itself, and then kicks that service off. Now, it's very easy to obfuscate or change your code so that that binary doesn't get picked up. You're still leaving a binary on that machine. You're still creating a service on that machine. If you have any type of monitoring whatsoever on those machines, you should definitely detect, when something like psexec is actually happening. But one of the methods that people have been shifting from is, instead of doing psexec, is WMI. And WMI is friggin' awesome. It's fast, and you can do whatever you want to with it. You can do full remote code execution. You can execute commands on behalf of it. You can do pass the hash through WMI. You can do anything you want to as this method for lateral movement, and it literally goes unseen in most cases. And so I released a tool called Spray WMI, and before I take all the credit for that, a lot of folks, there's a tool called WMIS, which was a reworked package of a Microsoft product that you can use. What?
That's the WMI, Windows Management Interface?
The Windows Management Interface, yep. Which is exposed on all ports on a machine, which is awesome for us. But as part of this is a recompiled one. I think it was released at DerbyCon or DEF CON or something like that. But it supports pass the hash now, which is great. So you can do pass the hash through WMI. And what's nice about this, and what I did with Spray WMI, is what you do is you give it credentials, right? So if I give it a domain name or a local work group, if I have local admin accounts, if I give it a username and password, and then a CIDR notation, like if I want to spray an entire CIDR notation, like a Class C or Class B, the type of payload that I want to, the machine that it needs to connect back to, so I'm going to do a reverse connection, so I'm going to have them connect back to me, and then the port I want, and then optional, do you want it to spawn Metasploit for you? What this will do is it will go out and it will generate PowerShell injection code that never touches disk, and it creates a PowerShell command that it gets executed through WMI, and it runs on all the hosts that I have access to as that user account or a compromised machine that I can do, and it sprays that into memory real time. It doesn't leave remnants on the disk. It doesn't start a service or anything like that. It's completely evasive of any type of like PSExec type patterns. And what will happen is it'll execute that, compromise the machine, and then send a shell back to you, real time. Now, what's great about it is it does not require administrative level rights. You can do this with a regular user account. So, if you can authenticate to the system through WMI and you have those permissions as a regular user, you can spray you can use Unicorn, which I'll show you here in a second, to inject into the operating system and then compromise and have full access. They might be asking, well, how do I detect this? That's great. There are ways through WMI. If you're not familiar, Charles, what's the WMI query for PowerShell?
For PowerShell, process.
Win32 process. Okay, so you can query WMI for Win32 process to look at what's happening through PowerShell, and will actually give you all the commands that happen in that. So if you monitor off of that and you see things, there's certain patterns that you can look for that is definitely malicious in nature that you can actually trigger an alarm on this with. Charles is our residential WMI ninja now. Binary, awesome. But it definitely makes it a lot easier. Now I'll just show you really quick what happens. If anybody's played with Unicorn before, it's a tool you can get from Trusted Tech. And what this does is it does what's called an x86 downgrade attack. And I'm going to show this to first, and then I'll show you spray WMI. So what this will do, and there's a few different attacks within Unicorn now. The first one is the one I'm going to show you, which is the x86 downgrade attack through PowerShell. There's also a couple other ones. What's great with PowerShell, and the way that this technique works is I did a talk at DEF CON 12 or 11 with a guy named Josh Kelly. It was the very first security PowerShell talk ever. So I can claim like I'm like Josh and I are like the godfathers of security talks on PowerShell, which is really cool. Which I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but it was called PowerShell OMFG, and it was like it was the PowerShell pre-release version that they'd come out with. And we started looking at PowerShell, and we figured out a bunch of cool stuff that you can do, like dumping the SAM database. And we released I know this is horrible, but we released a Metasploit module that when you ran it, it was run power dump. But it was, it was fun back at DEF CON. And so we did those, and we did a lot of other ones. One of the things that we identified was that you could get around execution restriction policies by passing what's called encoded command, which is a way of taking whatever you want to, compacting it, casting it Unicode, and then base64 encoding it. And what we did, what we figured out is that you can basically just take a long string and then paste it onto the operating system that you have access to, and then it injects and does whatever you want to through PowerShell. Now, a super smart guy who's one of my, I got like a man crush on him in the security industry. His name's Matthew Graber. If you ever follow PowerShell stuff, Matthew Graber is one of the guys to definitely follow. That and WMI too. He's just, guy's wicked smart. I think he works at the Varus Group. He now used to work at Mandiant, but super smart dude. Highly recommend it. He runs exploit-monday.com. He came out with the technique through PowerShell that you can natively launch shellcode directly into memory. So Metasploit shellcode directly into memory through PowerShell. And so I was looking at his code, and I a long time ago incorporated this in the set. But the problem is that you never know if you're running on a 64-bit or 32-bit platform, and so you'd have to have 64-bit shellcode and 32-bit shellcode in order to get those. Well, I wrote what's called an x86 downgrade attack, which takes Metasploit shellcode, and it's only 32-bit shellcode, and I use PowerShell to detect whether I'm in a 32-bit or 64-bit process. And if I'm in a 64-bit process, then I downgrade that process to a 32-bit process, and then I execute the native 32-bit shellcode in memory. Sorry if that seems like a lot of crazy stuff, but needless to say, it's very reliable. It works on every version of Windows that has PowerShell installed, which is going to be Windows Vista and above. I think Windows XP Service Pack 3 and above or whatnot, right? And so it works, cross-platform. Needless to say, it actually works perfect in Windows 10 as well. I didn't make any changes whatsoever for that in Windows 10, which is great. So to run this, if I just do Python unicorn.py, Windows interpreter, reverse TCP, and you can use whatever payload you want to. The command line is, I have to take shellcode, but I have to keep it so small that it fits on one command line argument. And so, but all of the Metasploit payloads work perfectly, even like the larger ones like reverse HTTP, reverse HTTPS, even that stager, which is about twice the size of a reverse TCP, actually fits very well into this. then it's going to want to know my IP address, so I'll just get my IP. And I'll go ahead and run this. And this is going to automatically generate the PowerShell code for you. It's going to cast the Unicode base64 encoded, get the string all ready to go, and it's also going to create a Metasploit RC file for you. So you can just run msf console-r and then unicorn.rc, and this will install create the listener for you that's ready to go. But to look at this, this is the command that ends up getting run on your computer. It's just PowerShell space -window hidden -enc, which is encoded command, and then it's just the base64 encoded string with all the bad stuff in it. If you took this and copy and pasted that into a Windows command prompt, it would give you a shell and it would all be in memory. It wouldn't touch disk or anything like that. So it's all memory resident again. And that's what SprayWMI does. It'll automatically generate the payload for you, and then you can rip through CIDR notations, and it's fast. I think I do like 70, 80 threads per instance, so it'll actually rip through about 80 hosts, per usually like second or two. So you can rip through like a class C in like a couple of seconds. So it's very quick of getting access to a lot of stuff. Like it was really neat. I was just on a pen test recently, and it's just like shells. Like this is cool, really cool. But I actually wrote this on a pen test when I was at a customer because PSExec commands wasn't working, which is what I would usually use with this combined with this attack. And so I wrote SprayWMI to kind of help assist it. So a really easy way of creating it and doing that. And again, those are all open source and free for you to go and download. One of the other cool attacks within Unicorn, and I'll show you the HTA one in a second, that's really cool. But Matthew Graber, again, man crush on him. Matthew figured out a way to do binaries. So let me put this in perspective. A long time ago, the only way to really get a binary from a system was to take it and base64 encode it, put it in a specific format, and use Windows Debug to convert it back to a binary for you. Now that method was great, but then I did a DEF CON talk at DEF CON like 10 or 11, and they removed, like literally like the next week, Microsoft's like, I don't even know why this is still here, so we're gonna remove it from all future versions. So they removed Windows Debug from the method. So getting binaries to a system where you can't support like file uploads, like if you're doing like SQL injection, for example, you need to figure out how to get a binary onto there. There was, wasn't a lot of good ways other than like echoing FTP files and things like that. And so Matthew actually figured out a way, and this is this dates back to every single version of Windows, every current version of Windows, and this is such a stupid thing. I can't believe none of us have thought about this before, but it's awesome. You take a binary, you convert it to base64, and you put it in a specific format. Let me show it to you real quick. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Oh, wrong command. So give it a second to generate here. Oh, that didn't do it, hang on. Where is it? Again, I write these tools, but I forget the syntax. Oh, I need an exe file. Anyways, if I had an exe file, I can actually hang it. I think that's right. Yeah, okay. I'll create a quick exe really fast. There we go. So if you run this command on a machine, certutil space -decode encoded attack.crt back to encoded exe, and the format of the exe is that. So that's my base64 encoded exe, and then you just give it a big insert. You can use certutil to convert your binary back to you for for instance. So like if you need to use like SQL injection or something like that, you just do that. It's stupid simple. Like I said. It's awesome. One of my other favorites within Unicorn is, and it's also built into set, and I've actually switched to this purely aside from the Java applet. Like the Java applet has always been great, but companies have actually gotten a lot better at deploying Java or locking it down so that like applet files and things like that can't be executed. And so this is like my new Java applet, and what's great about it is it's built into Windows, so you can use it anytime you want to. It's called HTAs. HTAs are content types that you can use that require additional permission on your operating system, and you can launch them through browsers. Now it requires a prompt, but what's great about the prompt is it looks like it's signed and running by from Microsoft. So when it pops up, it's like publisher is Microsoft, and it wants you to open up this HTA file. Do you want to open it? Everybody's like, well, it's from Microsoft. I'm sure it's okay. And you hit open, and then it compromises your computer. So with HTA files, that's how we've been doing most of our fishes now, is we use HTA content files to use PowerShell injection. So what happens is you go to a website that looks legitimate, and then they open up the file, they open up the HTA file, and then it executes PowerShell, and then it compromises their machine through like the unicorn attack. And so it's, again, all in memory, doesn't touch disk or anything like that. And it's had a high success rate. In fact, I think it's a higher success rate than we've ever had with Java, which is really crazy. But I'll show you this. So we just do unicorn, Windows, interpreter, reverse TCP, and I'll just do my IP address again, 443, and just type HTA. This will automatically generate the HTA code for you. And so, already exists. Let me delete that. That's it. That shouldn't do that. I'll have to remove that next time. At least I handled the exception. That's new for me. So it creates 3 files for you. Your index.html file, which is going to be whatever you want it to be. You can create whatever fish you want to and set it on. It'll actually it embeds into the web cloner, so you can clone any website you want to and have it embed into that. But in this case, it just gives you the HTA tags that you need in order to launch HTA. Launcher you can name whatever you want to, but that's the HTA file that actually needs to execute, because that's going to execute our malicious code. And so here is the 9-frame. It's embedded. It's 00 height and width, and then it's just going to go ahead and execute that HTA file, which is the launcher. And that's all you need to embed into any website that you clone. The launcher is just this. So that's the launcher itself. And what's great about HTAs is once they hit run, you have full access to their computer. So it's like there's no sandboxing or anything like that you have to worry about. It's just full access to their computer, which is phenomenal.
Even as a lesser privilege account?
So it'll run under the context of that user account. So it's going to spawn a process under the context of your account. So if you're running under a limited user account, it'll compromise the user account. It'll still work. You still get a shell on that machine and all that good stuff. But it's going to be under the context of the user accounts, like it's like system or anything. That'd been cool. So I'll run this real quick. I'll launch Windows 8 real fast. I'll show you, it looks a little different in Windows 10. But what's great is you can just build your pretext too. Like, hey, just make sure when you're doing this, your Microsoft's going to ask you to launch the site securely. Just go ahead and hit run. Okay, cool. No. So it'll go ahead and you hit this little open button here. And notice here's where you get. It says that a website wants to open web content using a program. Your name is Microsoft HTML application host. The publisher is Microsoft Windows.
Sounds legit.
Sounds legit, right? Hit allow. And nothing happens. Everything was good. What happened to my... I have my Linux box here somewhere, I swear. Oh, it's probably hidden behind. Yeah, there we go. And if I had I didn't have a shell open, hang on. So let me get a window open, I'll do that again really fast. Ignore the warnings, it's all good. All right, ready to go. Let's run runs again. And it takes a second. It'll work. There it goes. And boom, you're all set. So that easy. And you can have whatever action you want to afterwards. You can have it redirect to a different site or whatever you want to. Normally what we do is we'll run a fish that's like, harvests his usernames and passwords first before we get to that prompt, just so we can have creds. And then we hit them with that launcher afterwards when they have to go through like a survey or whatever we're doing as far as the fish. And then you hit them with that, and then it compromises them. So you get you get the double whammy, right? You get creds, and then if people are like, oh, I don't want to do that, you can't, you still got creds to their box. So, either way, it works fine. But this is cool. If you don't know this too, by the way, just another trick. See where it says sending encoded stage here? There's an advanced option variable inside of Metasploit called set enable stage encoding to true. And what that does is it mangles the second stage, which often gets picked up by like Symantec, endpoint protection like SEP12 and a lot of the other ones. They'll actually pick up on that second stage because it's a very much known entity. What happens is on this one, if you do set enable stage encoding to true, it'll mangle the second stage so that it's polymorphic. It's using Shikata-Gaine encoding, which is very predictable on the executable, but it's not over the network wire. So nothing will pick that up when it's going over. Additionally, most recently, if you don't know this, Metasploit's reverse HTTPS module is getting picked up by a lot of SEP and everything else. The reason for that is some of the advanced options. There's predictable SSL certificates and a couple of other ones. And the advanced options, you can change those, and those gets around SEP no problem with that as well. There's also another cool one if you haven't seen it. It's called PowerShell Empire. Empire is another command and control type framework that came out from like Harmjoy and a lot of the other folks out there. That's a really cool one as well, and it's purely, it's like basically like Meterpreter. It's a Meterpreter replacement that emulates very much like a C2 command and control infrastructure, but it's all written in PowerShell. So Mimikatz, dumping clear text passwords in memory, that's all built into that. It's all PowerShell avenue. It's all memory resident, which is nice. So yeah, that's Unicorn and that. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Kevin do something similar where he created a company called Windows Applet Update, and then you do a little screen pop-up. The publisher is Windows Applet Update.
Do you know who showed him that, by the way?
Well, is the industry going to do anything about that? Because it's so easy to befuddle the average person.
So for the Java applet attack, I own verified publisher. I own this is a legit update. I own please don't click. I even have ones that are belligerent, this is a malicious applet, and I still get clicks just to test it. But I own the way that you have to do that. What happened was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you used to be able to code sign Java applets and do self-signing. And if you self-sign them, you can make the publisher anything you wanted to. So a lot of us went around to talks this is horrible, and they finally, Oracle finally changed it. And so they made it so that you had to have code signing certificates for that. Now, code signing certificates are still very easy to get. You either need to get a doing business as, or if you go to one of the lower end code signing places, you can basically just give them a proof of the website, and they'll actually give you the code signing certificate. So you can literally register whatever you want to. So whatever domain name you can register and make the company name that, you can get a code signing certificate for that specific name. So that's a bad one, but that really relies off of what's called the Java applet attack, which, if you disallow applets from your environment from being executed on outside or only whitelisting them, that's my approved method of only whitelisting applets to certain areas. Most of your content filters should be able to support that. That's what I definitely recommend to get around that. But it still requires a level of effort now that you didn't have before. You've actually seen a significant reduction in Java attacks over the past year, and they've been moving more towards Adobe Flash as kind of the main exploitation method. So there's actually been a big reduction in Java. It doesn't mean that they're any better. I think the last patch, they patched 372 security vulnerabilities or something like that. It's horrendous. It just means that the attackers haven't been focusing on Java as much lately, more so in Adobe. Any other questions on that?
So for BTF, it sounds like you guys are doing you're moving towards a large automated network of on-demand
Platforms, yeah. Yeah.
What's the output look like? Have you automated output into a database type format?
The output of the tools and everything?
Yeah.
So as part of the option that you didn't see in that, it gives you an option to log everything. And it'll actually log all the output of the tools, all the commands that are issued on those boxes, And we actually have an option that I haven't added yet. It's written, I just haven't added it. But it'll actually create a password protected web interface. And you can log in that web interface and it shows all the commands real time as it's running. So you can, if a customer wants to look and see what's actually happening in that web interface, you can see all of that stuff running. So a little bit to that effect, but not like, like anything crazy. Any other questions? I'll probably add it, I just keep forgetting. It's in that code tucked away thing that I don't ever touch. All right, cool. I think that's really about it. Let's check real quick. Another one to check really quick is Pivoter. We released it at DEF CON this year. Jeff Walton and Jeff wrote it, so I can't talk that much about it. But Pivoter is a way to compromise a machine. Like a lot of times you'll compromise a machine as a limited user account. And the problem you have is pivoting, right? Because if you can't escalate your permissions to an escalated user, it's very hard to move laterally in the environment. So Pivoter is a really lightweight binary that you can convert into just straight into memory, so you don't have to rely on a binary. But you can actually send this and execute it on the remote system. And it's basically like having a transparent VPN with limited user rights on the environment itself. So then now you can move laterally in the rest of the environment. So it's basically a little tiny binary that emulates and reroutes all traffic, just TCP/IP on the box itself. So you can then launch attacks against other systems. So it's like basically having a VPN with a very limited user account. So that was a cool one that we released at DEF CON this year. If you use OSSEC HIDs, I released something called auto enroll. If you've ever used OSSEC, it's a really big pain in the butt to manage because you have to generate the key pairs and then you have to import those key pairs. So I wrote a protocol that basically handles all of the automatic enrollment. So basically all you have to do is install OSSEC on a machine and then kick off the script, and it automatically goes, communicates to the OSSEC server, registers it, puts the key back in, re-registers it, starts a service, all that good stuff. It's all automatic now. So you can do mass OSSEC deployments now through auto OSSEC now. So I released that, open source that. That's on the binary defense thing. So actually that's a different URL. It's over here. So auto OSSEC. So that's all open source too. And literally just what happens is you run the auto server on the OSSEC box and it creates a port. It's all AES encrypted with a dynamic cipher key. So all the communications are protected via AES, so no one can intercept those keys as it's being transported. And it supports Linux, it supports Windows. So if you want to deploy it to either flavor or whatnot, it'll deploy them on both of those, which is really nice. And if you haven't seen Artillery, that's a tool that I wrote a long time ago. It's like an active honeypot. Check it out. But one thing to note, if you want to get up-to-date feeds of IP addresses that are bad, and this is about as good as, I prefer to get to URLs eventually, but this is updated about every 2 minutes, and these are IP addresses of anything that's launched attacks against any of the artillery servers that we have deployed at customer sites or across the country. I think we have a total of like 64 artillery servers out there. And so if it detects threats in those, it actually sends them real time back up to here, so you get those. And if you ever need, this isn't public. This is going, wait, you're recording this, aren't you? Yeah.
You want me to stop?
Yeah, can you stop it real quick?
Yeah.